There's something deeply strange buried inside you. Right now, somewhere on this planet, there are over 8 billion humans. And almost all of them, without being told, without a law forcing them, choose one person, maybe for a few years, maybe for a lifetime, but one. That is weird. Every other primate you're related to doesn't do this. Chimpanzees don't. Gorillas sort of do, but only because one dominant male beats every other male into submission. And bonobos, your closest living relative, sharing 98.7% of your DNA, have sex constantly, casually, with basically everyone in their group. It's how they say hello. It's how they resolve an argument. It's how they share food. For bonobos, mating is social glue, the way a handshake is for us. So here's the question that nobody asks out loud. If your ancient ancestors behaved more like bonobos, and the scientific evidence strongly suggests they did, then what happened? What changed? What forced a creature that spent millions of years mating freely to suddenly stop, pair off with just one individual, and build an entire civilization around that decision? The answer isn't love. It isn't religion. It isn't culture. It's a survival problem so brutal and so specific that it quietly rewired the biology, the emotions, and the social instincts of the entire human species. And once you understand it, you'll never look at marriage, or jealousy, or heartbreak, or commitment the same way again. To understand what changed, you have to first understand what we actually were before civilization entered the picture. For the first several million years of human evolution, our ancestors lived in small nomadic bands, groups of roughly 20 to 50 individuals, always moving, always together. Everyone knew everyone. There were no borders, no fences, no concept of property, no last names. Resources were shared. Children were raised collectively by the group, not by individual parents. And sex was not the emotionally loaded, socially regulated act it is today. Anthropologists who study the few remaining hunter-gatherer societies on Earth, our closest living window into how ancient humans actually organized themselves, consistently find that sexual norms in these groups are far more relaxed than anything practiced in modern civilization. Many of these societies hold a belief that researchers formally call partible paternity. It's the idea that a child doesn't have one father. It has several, because multiple men contributed to creating it through sex with the mother during pregnancy. And this wasn't considered a scandal. It wasn't even considered unusual. It was practical. More recognized fathers meant more men with a personal stake in protecting and feeding that child. The child's survival odds went up. The system worked. This wasn't chaos. It was a functioning social arrangement. In the African savanna, roughly 2 million years ago, it made sense. Nobody fought over paternity because paternity didn't need to be exclusive to mean something. Resources were scarce, but the burden was shared. The group survived together, or it didn't survive at all. But then something happened that shattered this system at its foundation. The climate changed. Around 1.8 million years ago, the forests of Africa began to shrink. Open grasslands expanded across the continent. The plants, fruits, and insects that females had been gathering, food they could collect while still carrying and nursing infants, became dramatically harder to find. So humans began hunting large animals, which meant something entirely new had entered the human diet. Meat. Meat changed everything. It was dense in calories. It fueled the rapid expansion of the human brain, growing it to nearly 3 times the size of our earliest ancestors' brains in less than 2 million years. But it introduced a catastrophic problem that would alter the trajectory of human behavior for the rest of our existence as a species. Bigger brains meant babies were born more helpless than ever before. Human infants today are essentially premature compared to the newborns of other primates, born before their brains are fully developed, completely dependent, unable to walk, unable to feed themselves, unable to survive a single day without intensive, continuous care from another person. A mother in this condition could not hunt. She could barely defend herself against predators. She needed sustained, reliable, daily support from someone with enough personal investment to actually keep showing up, day after day, through seasons of scarcity and danger. And that is precisely when paternity, for the very first time in human evolutionary history, became a survival variable. Not because of emotion, not because of jealousy, because of cold, ruthless evolutionary math. A male who had no certainty about whether a child was biologically his had no built-in reason to sacrifice for it. If he spent an entire exhausting day tracking and killing prey, dragging meat back to camp, coming home depleted and hungry, why would he hand that food to a child that might carry someone else's genes entirely? He wouldn't, not consistently, not reliably. And without that consistency, the infant's chances of surviving collapsed. The mothers whose children survived this new, harsher world were the ones who found a solution to this equation. And the solution, emerging slowly, blindly, across thousands of generations without anyone planning it, was exclusivity, offering one male the certainty that no other male had access to. Here is what actually happened, and it is considerably less romantic than any love story you have ever been told. Females began offering something that no free mating arrangement could provide: a guarantee, a biological assurance that this specific child belonged to this specific male. Not because females were forced or coerced into it, but because the females who made this offer produced children who were fed, protected, and cared for by an invested adult, while the children of females who didn't died far more frequently. And females didn't offer this for nothing. In return, they received something equally critical to survival: a committed provider, a male who brought back food specifically for them and their offspring, who stayed physically close, who fought off threats instead of wandering toward the next mating opportunity, who was present day after day, not out of generosity or nobility, but because he had a direct biological stake in the outcome. His genes were in that child. His survival was bound to that child's survival. Anthropologists call this arrangement pair bonding, and at its origin, it had nothing to do with romance, emotional connection, or love. It was a transaction, a deal struck between competing survival pressures, not between conscious individuals making a romantic choice. One of the most consequential arrangements in the entire history of life on this planet. The pairs who made this deal produced children who survived at dramatically higher rates. The individuals who didn't, who continued mating freely, who provided nothing specific to any one partner, watched their children die more often. Slowly, relentlessly, across hundreds of thousands of years, the pair bonders outsurvived and outbred everyone else. This was never chosen. It was selected. The universe did not ask for anyone's opinion. Now, early pair bonding was not a lifetime commitment. Evidence suggests that these first arrangements lasted roughly 3 to 4 years, just long enough to raise one child to a stage where the wider group could absorb some of the burden. Then the bond often dissolved and reformed with someone new. This pattern didn't vanish. Divorce rates in modern societies today still peak at exactly the 3 to 4 year mark. That is not a cultural accident. That is a behavioral fossil, the ghost of the original arrangement, still ticking inside modern humans 2 million years later. What made it permanent was farming. Around 12,000 years ago, humans stopped moving. They planted crops, built permanent settlements. And with permanent settlement came something that transformed pair bonding from a biological strategy into a legal institution: property. When you own land, you need to know who inherits it. When you accumulate grain, livestock, and wealth that passes between generations, bloodlines stop being abstract. They become economic and legal structures with real consequences. Kings needed legitimate heirs. Farmers needed certainty their sons were actually theirs. Entire communities developed around knowing who owed what to whom across generations. The only mechanism capable of securing all of this was controlling sexuality, making the pair bond official and public, surrounding it with social, religious, and eventually legal enforcement. That is marriage. Not a celebration of love, though it evolved into that. Not a spiritual union, though every major religion eventually adopted it. At its structural foundation, marriage is a property and inheritance solution that agriculture made necessary. The emotional wiring for pair bonding already existed, built over millions of years of selection. Agriculture simply formalized it, locked it into law, and assigned priests and governments to enforce it. Here is what that means for you personally. You feel jealousy because your ancestors who felt jealousy guarded their genetic investment more aggressively, and their children survived. You feel deep attachment because your ancestors who bonded intensely provided more consistently, and their children survived. You feel heartbreak so severely because losing a bonded partner once meant your entire survival structure had collapsed, and your nervous system still has not received the update that it is no longer 2 million years ago on an African grassland. Every emotion you have ever felt around love, commitment, or loss is ancient survival code. It wasn't written by poets. It was written by infant mortality rates, by seasons of famine, by predators lurking in the dark. That doesn't make love less real. It makes it more extraordinary, because somewhere deep inside the long, brutal arc of human evolution, the cold transactional deal became something biology never planned for, something that makes people sacrifice decades for another person, grieve for the rest of their lives when that person is gone, and choose, against all logic and self-interest, to stay. Evolution needed 2 people to share a fire long enough to keep one child alive. Humans decided to call it something else entirely. Thanks for watching, and do subscribe our channel for more interesting science facts to